So let's start at the very beginning, right? Explain to me what a design system is, because there is a lot of this kind of entanglement of terminology with UX, UI, right? These terms that are used. What is a design system and what is not?
Dan, what would you think it's a design system?
Don't do this, because I think a design system, so in my mind, a design system would be like a set of rules or variables that you follow in order to create a design, right? But I'm almost certain that because I was thinking about that before this, right? I'm thinking, okay, that's just like a style guide, right? So what differentiates
That brings us to the first topic, right? The entanglement of terms in UX UI.
right.
So shortly, there's a lot of things that designers are doing and calling design systems, which they are not. They are designs with a system. So therefore, I call this first subtopic, systematic design systems, or the systematic designs, or the entanglement. What happens is that designers usually design stuff, right? And then there is a certain system to it. There's a consistency in styles and color palette and typography and interaction. So naturally, it is a system, right? And it is designed. So, ta-da, design system.
Right.
But like you noticed, it's not necessarily a design system. It's usually a style guide, or really, a systematic approach to design. So just having a systematic approach to your designs doesn't make it design system. And when you go, for instance, on the popular platforms that, by the way, I'm not in favor of using as if you're designers. I'm not recommending that you ever go on Behance, Dribble, Awards, and similar to gather inspiration and stuff, because this is where you get a lot of false information. You would, or even Figma, what's it called? The Figma community, right? So if you type there on those platforms design system, you will get mostly something like some UI kits, or style guides that would not be design systems. What's the difference between those and design system is that simply their purpose is different, right? Just because you have a nice systematic approach to design doesn't mean that it can be used by other designers and developers. So design systems purpose is to be reused, right? So if you're investing in making a design system, it means that it's going to be reused a lot. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to do it, which brings us to your question: should you do it as a company, right? If you are planning to reuse the system or the design that you have, if you have a product that needs to scale or is going to be used for years and years, then definitely, by all means, invest in a design system, because it's going to save you a bunch of money. Yeah, please.
So the difference then between just like a style guide or a systematic approach to working and a design system is this reusability. So can be inherited by the people who come after, or it can be given in a vacuum to another designer and they could use the same process.
Yeah. Maybe more importantly, not just designers, but anyone that is going to be touching the system, right? That can be first and foremost developers, right? The front-end developers, but other people as well, right? Anyone that you have in your product team, anyone that is going to be using any kind of a design or approach, content people, right? Like someone that is in charge of content management. Imagine that you have a system and someone is replacing images, putting new content, text, and stuff. They also need to know how to use a design system, right? So it's not just designers and developers. There's anyone that is touching the system should be allowed to use it, right? And to reuse it all the times. So how do you know if you definitely don't need a design system? Is like you're building a website. It's going to be one-off project. You're getting paid to design or redesign someone's website. You do this. You make a nice style guide and you're done. There's no reason to do a design system because it's probably never going to be that much reused. So a good, solid style guide is just going to cover what you need, or cover, like if someone needs to tweak it, make some changes in a year or so, they will have a nice style guide. So they kind of understand what your systematic approach was, right? Before they make a new element or something. But So in short, it would be design systems are mostly for products, right? Digital products that are going to be, reused a lot and not for websites and one-off projects.
Okay. So if I'm making a one-off thing, style guide, if I'm starting a company, if I'm starting a new startup out there or anything that's going to expand outside the scope, that's when a design system should be implemented.
No.
Okay.
There's a catch there. So, of course, it's not when you're starting. So you're not really able to do a design system on just like at the start of your company, because you don't have.
Implement a design system like halfway through? Then how do you like?
The thing is like that you first have to have a developed design and a style guide, right? And enough content and enough ambition to scale and enough mess to be able to have a good design system, right? Of course, you can start with a good design system from the beginning, but this is also where I'm going to come back to the first question and this entanglement of terms. There's also levels of design system. There's a design system, something that would be like a full design system that is starting when you have a company that is already quite big and you have a lot of people working, big teams of developers and designers, and it's messy. And there's a lot of documentation. There's a lot of red line specs. There's a lot of stuff that like it's just slowing everyone down. And for instance, you have a product that needs to be used on many platforms, on many devices. And this is where like the mess is happening. This is the time to invest heavily in a design system because it's going to save you. There's going to be a big return on investment at one point when people just start coherently using the design system a lot. So this is a very common scenario when you build a design system. And in this case, you would start with a set of goals and principles, values that your company has, right? So a design system is not just about like having nice style guide that is scalable. It's also about the values that a company has that need to be completely reflected on the design system. So, for instance, my favorite company's value is medium. I guess that everyone here knows medium. Their motto, almost their value or guiding principle that they have is called direction over choice, which means that they're there to direct the users to be able to do the task on their website, meaning like writing blogs, writing articles, and they're going to choose the font, they're going to choose the layout, everything is chosen already. It's not Tumblr that you can change background and fonts and stuff, right? So this is, and they have a really nice design system. So this is one successful example of a company that already had quite a big number of employees and a lot of users before doing a design system. But then you can also have a smaller company that has a really solid UI and a good style guide, and they have ambition to scale, and they need to employ a lot more people. Their product is going to grow, and this is when you do a design system, but it's not going to be necessarily the one that has strong set of principles and values, but it's going to be more like a technical design system, which we are teaching in a bootcamp that my company is doing. It's more like a documentation between designers and developers. Mm-hmm. So it's not to be used necessarily by content people, by brand people, right? It's really about UI. It's about styles, right? So most of the courses that you will see on design systems this is what it's going to be. So this would be like a different level of design systems. Something in between a really developed style guide and developing handoff would be the design systems that we are teaching, right? Because it's a document that is about naming conventions mostly. If you heard, Dan, have you heard about like tokens in design systems? Maybe this term like crossed your mind somewhere or something.
I've heard it from the design team here at TrueNode in passing. But
So it sounds quite fancy, like design tokens in a design system. It's not. It's just a name, right? It's a naming convention.
Is it like a variable?
Exactly, like a variable that you, a developer, can easily implement in your library. And then when something changes, for instance, you have like this one token that carries the information about one style, right? It carries the information about one type of a color that is being used throughout the system. And then at one point you want to do a redesign, or you're going to change the color. It's going to be very easy to implement these changes throughout the design and throughout the engineering part. So it's about reusability and about easiness of implementation of changes.
So, but what platform do you build a design system in then? So I have a few questions here. So can any of this be automated? If we have a well-designed design system and then I change a color, am I going to know that I've picked a hex that isn't part of this, of this color palette? Or is it still a very manual process where it's almost written down and I have to check everything up? Where do you build design systems? This is a bit of a
question. How we teach the students to do it is in Figma, because Figma is perfect to do it, because you can build nice tables with a really good overview. So a development team can really easily see all the changes. And also the changes are really transparent because you can leave notes. Of course, there's a manual part that you need to tell to the development team, we're changing. I mean, these changes are quite big. It's not something that actually something can automate, right?
Right.
Like you're saying. Other ways to build, there's platforms that are like web platforms, websites that you can build design systems, like Zero Height. That became like quite popular in the last few years. Basically, they're enabling you with their set of presets, right, to do it more easily. I'm a bigger fan of having more control and doing everything on your own in Figma, because you have the flexibility to do it in your branding, and you're not limited by any presets. So there are tools, in short, there are tools that are built right now, becoming more and more popular, that are something in between building a design system and doing a development handoff, and a manual way to do it in the design tool like Figma.
So why do you think then that recently design systems are so much more popular than they were before? Like what's this emergence of this technology now, or this process now, as opposed to maybe 10 years ago?
Well, it didn't really exist as a term 10 years ago. I mean, at least I'm for sure it did exist. It wasn't just prominent, right?
Yeah.
And at one point, I would say around 2016, 17 is when I started hearing about okay, there's a conference dedicated just to design systems. So it really blew up. Blew up, yeah. I want to say blew off, it's not blew off.
Don't say that.
Exactly. So it blew up at one point after people started to use development handoff tools like I don't know if you've heard of Zeppelin. That was like a game changer for us as designers, and also working with developers. And there was a rise simply in awareness that this is something that is a really practical tool. So I think that designers just instantly noticed how practical and good this can be. Another reason is that it's kind of at this moment the top job you can have, right? To be a systems designer, someone that does design systems sounds very, very cool. And it's not really for someone that is juniors, and it requires that you have some experience behind you to be able to create design systems. So it's kind of like a top job. So this is also what's making it quite hot. Another reason would be among companies is the competition, this competitor has it, we need to have it as well, so this is another reason, which doesn't necessarily mean that they will have a use for it. Like I told you, you really need to have a reason to be able to invest in this. And there's another topic, I don't know if we have that much time. I think that we went through the entanglement do you need a design system? Why so hot? And design systems in Figma. There's another topic that we didn't have initially in the list, and it's a struggle around design systems. It's a struggle how to get a buy-in, how to sell the idea of a design system when you are a designer or a developer in the
how much of a resource commitment does it take to implement a design system? Like, is it a real consideration for a company? It's going to take a lot of resources away from actual work. How does that look?
Now we come back to the two types, right? One type that would be like in a big company that starts from the principles. In that case, yes, it's going to be a big commitment. It's going to last like about a year or maybe even longer.
Wow.
So it's a project, yeah. So you need to allocate a lot of resources to. And the other one would be like the lean one that is more something that we're teaching, right? So the technical part of the design system would be for smaller systems, and also it's something that you would need to allocate resources to, because you would need someone to really work on this as a project. So it's not something that you can tell to the team like, yeah, when you have the time, please build a design system. It needs to be a really big dedicated project that needs to be done. It can be done. It shouldn't be done by one person, even if it's like this second type, a smaller type. It should be done because it's still complex. In any case, it's going to be a complex system. Simply, there's so many styles, right? Even if it's not such a big product, there's just building tokens. It can be a challenge because of all the different naming that you have, right? So it has quite a lot of components.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one question then, one more from my side before we start. There's a few questions in the chat, but before we open it up, I know this is a bit like asking what goes into a cake because it's going to be different every time, but can you like high level, what are the ingredients of a design system? I mean, is it just color palettes? Is it logos to use? What are the kind of...
Sure. Let's start from the type 2, like this, like cheaper, easier one, technical one. Everything that is a style goes into a design. So if you imagine like having the CSS as a cascading style sheet, like style meaning, the style from the CSS, anything that has a style in it goes into a design system. So this is all the typography that you have, all the variations within the typography you have, all the color palettes, you have color palette that is a brand color palette and an action color palette, like for interactive elements that might not be the same as the brand colors. And here you have states, right? You have a button that has a default state, the hover state.
Wow. Okay. So there's also like the engineering attributes
yes.
Apply to everything.
Exactly. So this is everything that engineers can think of goes into a design system. What else can be there? Grid system. Grid system is a big one for design system, right? If what kind of grid you're doing? Is it a 12-column bootstrapped grid, right? Do you have breakpoints? How many breakpoints do you have? Which are the breakpoints?
Okay.
Like, these are, and each one of these has their own token, right? So each one of the components that we're talking about and the variables has a token on its own, right? So that needs to be defined.
So there is a lot more than really just like the open design there, which actually leads us very well to this question that Molly has asked in the chat, saying, what are the biggest challenges you face with engineering and implementation of these granular components? So I guess there, for example, if one of the tokens is like very specific and stuff, how is all of this? There is so many problems that can happen here between a design system and then designers and developers working on them in their own.
Yeah.
How do you unify
Of course, the biggest challenge always and the biggest problem is communication. And if you are one of you who's listening, if you are planning to do this, you need to start with communication with the development team, because if you have someone that is against this, and there's always people who are against doing any kind of change because they think they have a system that works, and if you want to implement any kind of changes, that you will get resistance. So you need to be aware of this. And if you don't get a buy-in from everyone that's going to use it, you will have problems, because they will not understand how it works. You will not be able to communicate well when you set the naming conventions. So this is where you need a development team. You're not just this is the naming convention I have for the tokens, and you just follow it. You shouldn't be done like this, right? It should be done with them. You can propose, this is the convention, this is the system I have for the naming. What do you agree? What do you think? And then when they build their own components, when they build libraries, right, and reusable patterns, they will also name them the same as they are in your design system. And if they don't do it like this, then you have a problem, because they will not know which is corresponding to what, right? So this is the most important thing. This is why I started talking about the design system as a document for naming conventions, right? So you need to be on the same page when it comes to the naming and understanding what it is for. So so this is the challenge, getting everyone on board.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then maintaining this communication, like, are we following the guide, has to be a constant kind of mantra. Okay, another question from Molly here. Like, what is your method when testing and designing an update component? So if you want to add something new into the system, is there like a set way to do this? It's not just free for all, I guess.
It's not, but someone has to be in charge of this. So if you would be updating components, then someone from the team needs to be in charge of making sure that the correct change has been implemented. Like I personally don't know of an automatic system to check this. Maybe there is. I'm not saying there isn't. So I would say that this would be like the simplest way would be that you have a dedicated person in the team that checks that the changes are implemented.
Is this a product manager's role? It feels like a kind of a technical PM's role.
Well, it really depends. Like, okay, now we're going into a different scenario where we have.
I need to know. It feels like this is the role that you fill here. I
mean, this brings us to a new topic, is like hybridization of roles, and in something that is happening also as a trend in design teams is that designers are becoming also project managers. So you would be imagine also, like, so you would have kind of like two different scenarios of working as a designer. One would be in a product team on a product in a company that has one product, or you would be a designer that works in an agency that is working with some other companies, right? And then there's a difference, in a product team, you would have a product or project manager that would make sure about the changes are implemented. But if you are working in an agency, then you would be either you would be also a project manager, or you would be taking some responsibilities from the project management. Okay.
That's all of my questions. So we have a few minutes left. If there is anyone else in the chat, or anyone wants to just turn their camera on, if you can, you feel free to jump in and ask now. Before anyone does that, thank you very much, Milan. That was very insightful.